So, Brian,
Yeah,
does working from home improve the employee experience?
it's a good question.
Thank you.
um, so the answer is yes, and the answer is also no. So what we learned, just so that everybody knows, we did do a lot of studies, and our first study that we did, where we surveyed not only the employees in contact centers from around the world, we did also the supervisors. So when we did that, and the first study we came out with was in May of 2020 is when we did that research. And we found some interesting things out right away. Is some people really like working from home. Some people really don't like working from home. Some people do like this hybrid and occasionally going in. And I think that was what was really important is it depends. It depends on the individual. And what people do like is having an option or flexibility.
You know what I think was interesting when we did those study, the very first study, as you said, I remember you and I thinking we're not going to get the results of the study out fast enough before everybody returns back to the office.
I
In
know.
fact, we thought it was going to take really too long because that was only going to be a temporary thing. By the time we moved forward to the second study, I think that's where things really started to gel. Was it several months later, almost a
Yeah.
year later, when
Yeah.
we knew this was becoming more of a permanent type of situation? And I think what I found interesting is it began to reveal something very fundamental. And that is that um, some companies were doing really well
Yeah.
in the remote work, and specifically having agents working from home, but some companies weren't. In fact, it was
Yeah.
almost really more companies were finding it some disaster filled because it was a mess. Some it was just really messy, and then others found it good. And what was the
Yeah.
difference? You know,
Well, and I
yeah,
was just going to say that so
yeah,
many people, the initial curve was, hey, everybody loves it,
that's right.
and
Yeah,
everything's good. And then it came crashing down. And, what we learned was people weren't ready or know how to work at home in a model that's sustainable.
right. And what I think we probably and for anybody that would be listening, we'll leave a link to our studies in the description, because I think what we found was not so much what works well at home. I think we've got some wonderful insight there. But I think the biggest learning I found is what's the difference between working in an office and working
Yeah.
at home, because we got to see the movement of from one to the other, which is
Yeah.
really not something you see, a widespread movement that quickly from one type of work to another. So for me, I think I found some things very insightful. And what I found was, for those of you who haven't watched it, we have a previous episode on really what is meaningful work. And a quick, brief synopsis: there are
Hmm.
three types of meaningfulness you can get from work.
Yep.
The
Yep.
first one is meaning from work, which is where the actual job, the money you make, such the compensation is what you find meaningful. The second type of meaningfulness is meaning at work, which is where you're part of another social system, it's connection, it's all these types of things. And the third one is meaningful work, that the actual job you do, what you do every day, has moments that are answer the bigger why for you. Your personal purpose comes through, not all the time, but every now and then. But enough of that happening adds up and becomes meaningful work.
Yep.
So what changed? Well, meaning from work went up.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. We found that,
Yeah.
there were all kinds of things you saw probably in that.
Show me
What
the
were some of
money.
the things that caused it? For example, people said, I no longer need babysitters, just simple things like that. Commuting costs. I don't have to
Yeah.
do dry cleaning anymore. But
Yeah.
then it
Going out to
became,
lunch. Hmm.
that's right. And it became even more of the benefit from that became I am actually home sooner. So now my life, in a sense, the money value of money became bigger in the sense that I'm
Hmm.
working less. I don't have an hour commute in and an hour home. I have 2 hours less in a day. Therefore, what I'm paid for actually means more. Some people, by the way, even like sold their cars, and so when people said
Yeah.
come back to
Wow.
work, like I cannot come
Yeah.
back into the office. All right, so So people that companies that were stuck really that the only value you were getting was that may have worked a little bit better, but then there was another problem, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Um, I could get a job anywhere now
Uh-huh.
that I'm remote. So if the only meaning I was getting from work was the compensation, I
Yeah,
could instantly
exactly.
move my compensation.
Hmm.
So that was a problem. Now take the second type of meaning, which is meaning from work. That
Yeah, the
dropped.
company. Yeah.
The company that dropped like
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah, you
And
don't have your friends around you. You don't have access to the leaders right away. You feel separated from them. And then there were some fun activities, but also the time with your supervisor. It's interesting. People still see it as a value to have time with their supervisor. That's
that's
what we
right.
found out.
It was a way of connecting to what's important to the company, to be able to get feedback, to make sure that, there's a lot of things we'll get into, I'm sure, in other episodes. There's a third type of meaningfulness we talked about, which is the actual job you do.
Yeah.
And those companies that were excelling were able to preserve that meaningfulness in the actual work they do. And that is a difference maker.
Yeah. And what we found out also, what was really important was if you think about it, did the agent's job really change?
No, not really.
They already knew how to remotely and virtually work with customers, and they
That's
were
right.
very well trained on how to do that. And so when we looked at that, we thought, wow, that's interesting. And it wasn't a whole lot more effort to work with customers.
Right.
Um, but where the effort was it was more difficult to get support for when I'm with customers, or support from my IT department, support from really my supervisor. So the person's job, in a sense, who changed the most from the studies that we did, it was a supervisor.
Exactly right.
They never knew how to lead remotely and the challenges that really came from that. And there was just more of a ripple effect to the entire operation when the supervisors felt like, hey, they didn't know how to do this. Plus, they were the ones more burned out, more
Right.
effort to work with their team, more effort to work with their bosses. So they were the ones suffering the most and working longer hours.
Yeah.
Like,
And
my day doesn't end.
what we heard from them was that what caused more effort was very fundamental. It was very simple things that got complicated. For example, when you're in person and you are monitoring your queue and you see that somebody went into Ox or simply logged out, you can peek up over the top of your monitor and see if they're still there. You
Yeah.
can see them walking towards the restroom, and you know. But when you're at home and you suddenly see something like that happen, well, what do? You right away message them, no
Yeah.
response. You text them, no response. You're making a phone call, no response. And so this builds up this whole idea that what we did as management in the office did not translate from a management team perspective to home. And I'm going to hit on the one that I think was the biggest, which we talk about the meaning from work. The supervisor took that, in a sense, for granted that with everybody in my presence, I can essentially will team unity together, which is, by
Yeah.
the way, a lot of what we do. We do socials, we do birthday parties, we do all of these things that brings people together. But also, because I'm sometimes as a supervisor, I know a lot of them will tell us, and we've got some quotes where they say, as a supervisor, I don't know how to help people have a good day, in a sense, with the customers, but I do know how to help them have a good day just as people. In other
Yeah.
words, the work is so tough, I will do these other things, the shiny objects we call it, that takes that away. Well, when you moved to working at home, those things all went away. You couldn't do those things anymore. And so all
Hmm.
of a sudden now we have agents who feel, in a sense, severed from the culture, separated from the
Yeah.
unity they felt. And now the only thing they have left is meaningful work. But that was never promoted or, in a sense, made happen in the office. So moving to home, they don't have it. So what do you have? Nothing. And what am I down
Yeah.
to? The last meaningfulness I have, which is the meaning of the compensation.
So the key in the work at home model even if it's hybrid, is the focal point of the supervisor. They're that, what we call the delta, that is going to take you, to a good place or to a really challenging place. So the key, what we always talked about, is they have to do a little bit more, and they probably should have been, whether you're in the center or hybrid or completely virtual, the supervisor needs to do this. And that is becoming more of like what we call like a life coach. They have to personally connect and understand each one of their people. Because we said at the beginning, everybody's going through different things. And some were going through extreme loneliness and some other things. So they had to kind of help people adapt to the environment. And their whole focus is not, so-called coddling. It's actually the opposite. It's how do I enable my employee to be self-learning, self-correcting, so that they can operate really well remotely, but also I know what they're going through. I'm here to support them, and we have a good relationship. So they know, hey, I'm here for you and I'm supporting you, so that you find the actual interactions with customers that you're doing throughout the day meaningful. Then the whole system kind of works.
I agree with you. And I think more and more this idea of what changed from when you worked in the office to what works at working remotely, working at home, is what the real lesson is. That's what I found is the
Correct.
difference between the two. But as you said earlier, I'll repeat because I think it's worth repeating. We've seen all situations work: fully remote, fully on site, and hybrid. And we've seen all of them fail. And so go back to your beginning. Yes, it can work, and no, it can't.
Yeah. And the key is, once again, it's meaningful work and the importance of the supervisor and all that. So, all right. Well, hey, once again, comment on this episode. We want to hear from you. Let us know about things you want in future episodes, and continue to bring others to this great contact center challenge. So until next time, take care.
Take care.